Welcome to my channel. Imagine this. You've packed your bags, said your goodbyes, made it through traffic to the airport, and you're standing at the check-in counter ready to start your holiday or that important business trip, only to be told that you cannot board your flight, not because of overbooking, not because of a ticketing error, but because of a simple mistake with your identification that you didn't even know you'd made. This exact scenario is happening to thousands of travelers right now in 2026, and it's not just happening at obscure regional airports. We're talking about major international hubs across the United States, Europe, Australia, and beyond. The frustrating part is that most of these denied boardings are completely preventable if you know what to look for before you leave home. The rules around acceptable identification for air travel have changed significantly, and many passengers are finding out the hard way that what worked last year or even last month is no longer sufficient. So if you have any travel plans coming up, whether domestic or international, you need to pay very close attention to what I'm about to share, because this could be the difference between making your flight and watching it take off without you. Let's start with what's actually happening at airports right now. Aviation security agencies worldwide have implemented stricter identification verification protocols in 2026, and these aren't just recommendations, they're mandatory requirements that airlines must enforce or face substantial penalties. In the United States, the Real ID Act enforcement has reached full implementation, which means that starting May 7, 2025, and continuing throughout 2026, standard state-issued driver's licenses from certain states are no longer accepted for domestic flights. You now need either a Real ID-compliant driver's license, a passport, a military ID, or another approved form of federal identification. The problem is that millions of Americans still carry non-compliant licenses and don't realize they're unusable for air travel until they arrive at the airport. Similarly, in the European Union and the United Kingdom, new biometric requirements and digital identity verification systems have been rolled out, creating confusion about which documents are acceptable, particularly for domestic and intra-European flights. Here's the identification mistake that's catching thousands of travelers completely off guard: document expiration dates. You might think that as long as your ID hasn't expired yet, you're fine to travel, but that's no longer the case. Many airlines and countries now require that your identification be valid for a specific period beyond your travel dates, typically 3 to 6 months. This means if your passport expires in 4 months and you're planning a 2-week trip, you could be denied boarding even though your passport is technically still valid. This requirement has always existed for international travel to certain countries, but what's new in 2026 is that it's being applied more broadly and inconsistently, with some airlines enforcing it even for domestic flights as part of their standardized verification procedures. Travelers are showing up with passports or national ID cards that expire in a couple of months, assuming they're fine because the document is still valid, only to be turned away because the airline system flags it as insufficient. Another critical mistake involves the condition of your identification documents. Your passport or ID might be valid and have plenty of time before expiration, but if it's damaged in any way, it can be rejected. We're talking about water damage, torn pages, significant wear and tear, faded photos, or damage to the biometric chip in modern passports. In 2026, airport scanners and verification systems are more sophisticated than ever, using optical character recognition and biometric matching technology. If your document can't be scanned properly, or if the photo is too degraded for facial recognition systems to verify your identity, you will not be allowed to board. Immigration officials and airline staff have less discretion than they used to because automated systems are making these determinations, and once the system says no, there's very little that can be done at the airport to override it. Let's talk about name discrepancies, because this is causing massive problems for travelers, particularly women who have recently married or divorced. Your identification must match your ticket exactly, character for character. If your driver's license says Elizabeth Marie Johnson, but your ticket was booked under Liz Johnson or Elizabeth M. Johnson, you could face issues. While some airlines may allow minor variations, the trend in 2026 is towards zero tolerance for mismatches because of enhanced security protocols. This is especially problematic for people with hyphenated surnames, multiple middle names, or names that include accents, apostrophes, or spaces. The automated verification systems are programmed to flag any discrepancy, and while human agents can sometimes override these flags, they're increasingly reluctant to do so given the liability and security concerns. If you've recently changed your name due to marriage, divorce, or any other reason, you need to ensure that all your identification documents are updated and that you book tickets using the exact name that appears on your ID. International travelers are facing additional complications with visa and entry requirement changes. Even if you have a valid passport, many countries now require advanced electronic travel authorization, and the processing times for these have increased significantly. The United States ESTA, the European ETIAS, the UK ETA, the Canadian ETA, and Australia's ETA systems all require approval before you can board a flight, and what used to take minutes can now take days or even weeks during peak travel periods. Travelers are being denied boarding not because of their passport, but because they didn't obtain the required electronic authorization in advance. What makes this particularly frustrating is that these requirements keep changing, with countries adding new requirements or modifying existing ones with minimal notice. A destination that didn't require advance authorization last year might require it now, and if you don't check the current requirements before your trip, you won't find out until you're at the airport. For families traveling with children, the identification requirements have become significantly more stringent. Children, including infants, now need their own identification for most flights, and in many jurisdictions, a birth certificate is no longer sufficient. Passports are increasingly required even for domestic travel, and parental consent documentation is mandatory when a child is traveling with only one parent or with someone other than their parents. In 2026, airlines and immigration authorities are cracking down on potential child abduction cases, which means more scrutiny of family travel. If you're traveling with children and you don't have the proper documentation, including custody papers if applicable, you could all be denied boarding. Grandparents traveling with grandchildren need notarized consent forms from the parents, and these need to be recent because some jurisdictions won't accept forms older than 3 or 6 months. Digital identification is another area causing confusion. Several countries and regions have introduced digital ID options, including digital driver's licenses and mobile passport apps, but acceptance varies wildly between airlines and airports. Some airports have fully integrated digital ID verification lanes, while others don't accept digital identification at all. The problem is that travelers assume if their state or country has issued a digital ID, it will be accepted everywhere, but that's not the case. You still need to carry physical backup identification because there's no guarantee that the digital version will be accepted, particularly at international airports or on international flights. Additionally, technical glitches, dead phone batteries, or connectivity issues can render your digital ID inaccessible exactly when you need it most. Here's something that catches business travelers repeatedly. Photocopies and photos of your ID are not acceptable. It doesn't matter if you have a high-resolution scan of your passport on your phone or a laminated photocopy in your wallet. Airlines require the original physical document or, in limited cases, officially approved digital versions. This seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people try to board flights with photos of their lost or forgotten passports, assuming it will be sufficient in an emergency. It's not, and there are no exceptions, even if you can prove your identity through other means. If you've lost your identification shortly before travel, you need to go through official emergency replacement procedures, which can take hours or days, not try to improvise at the airport. Cruise passengers face a unique set of identification challenges in 2026. While you might not need a passport for a closed-loop cruise that starts and ends in the same U.S. port, you absolutely should have one because if you need to fly home from a foreign port due to a medical emergency, or if you miss the ship at a port of call, you'll need a passport to fly back. Travelers are finding themselves stranded in foreign countries after medical emergencies or missed departures because they only brought a birth certificate and driver's license, which were sufficient to board the cruise, but not sufficient to fly internationally. The rule of thumb now is that if your travel involves any possibility of international movement, even if unplanned, you need a valid passport. Senior travelers need to be particularly aware that older forms of identification, even if technically still valid, may not be accepted. Driver's licenses issued more than 10 or 15 years ago, even if they haven't expired, may lack the security features that modern verification systems require. Some jurisdictions allow driver's licenses to remain valid until age 75 or even for life, but airlines may not accept these older documents because they can't be verified through automated systems. If your identification was issued before 2010, you should seriously consider updating it even if it's technically still valid, because the likelihood of issues at the airport increases significantly with older documents. Here's what you absolutely must do before your next flight. First, check the expiration date on your passport and all other identification documents. If your passport expires within 6 months of your return date, renew it now. Don't wait. Passport processing times have increased significantly in 2026, and what used to take 4 to 6 weeks can now take 3 months or longer during busy periods. Second, physically inspect your documents for any damage. Look at the photo to ensure it's still clearly recognizable as you. Check for water damage, torn pages, or issues with the biometric chip if your passport has one. If there's any damage, start the replacement process immediately. Third, verify that the name on your ticket matches your identification exactly. If you've recently changed your name, update your identification before booking travel. Or if you've already booked, contact the airline to see if they can modify the ticket to match your ID. Fourth, research the specific requirements for your destination and any countries you're transiting through. Don't assume that what worked last year or what your friend told you is still accurate. Go directly to official government sources. Check the embassy website, the immigration authority website, and the airline's official requirements page. Fifth, if you're traveling internationally, verify whether you need any electronic travel authorizations and apply for them at least 2 weeks before your trip, not the night before. Sixth, make copies of all your identification and travel documents, both physical photocopies that you pack separately from the originals and digital scans stored securely in the cloud. While copies can't be used to board flights, they can dramatically speed up replacement procedures if documents are lost or stolen during your trip. Seventh, if you're traveling with children, gather all necessary documentation well in advance. This includes passports for each child, birth certificates, and notarized consent forms if both parents aren't traveling. Check the specific requirements for your airline and destination because they vary significantly. Eighth, enroll in trusted traveler programs if you're a frequent flyer. Programs like TSA PreCheck, Global Entry, Clear, or their international equivalents can provide an additional layer of verification and sometimes offer more flexibility when issues arise. Finally, arrive at the airport with extra time. The days of showing up an hour before a domestic flight are over. In 2026, with enhanced security screening and identification verification, you should plan for at least 2 hours for domestic flights and 3 to 4 hours for international flights, particularly during peak travel periods or if you're traveling from a major hub. The reality is that air travel in 2026 requires more preparation and attention to detail than ever before. The identification requirements are stricter, the verification systems are more automated and less forgiving, and the consequences of mistakes are severe. But here's the good news. Almost every denied boarding due to identification issues is preventable. It just requires you to be proactive, to verify your documents well before your travel date, and to stay informed about the current requirements. Don't let a simple ID mistake ruin your vacation because you'd have missed that important meeting or cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars in rebooking fees and missed connections. Take action now, check your identification, verify the requirements for your specific trip, and make sure you have everything you need well before you head to the airport. If you found this information helpful, please like this video so other travelers can find it before they make these costly mistakes. Share it with anyone you know who has upcoming travel plans, and subscribe because I'll continue to keep you updated on travel requirement changes throughout 2026 and beyond. Safe travels, and make sure your documents are in order before your next adventure.